some. And yeah, that's it. Unless there's any questions before I start. Does anybody know a little bit about what we're going to be talking about? Bone density treatment, loading of the bone. Okay. So, osteoporosis is called a disease. It's where bone becomes more porous. That's the name osteoporosis. It means porous bone in Greek. So when bone becomes more porous, it is more likely to fracture. There's other deconditioning that is associated. So when you see an elderly person and they're hunched over, it's called kyphotic, when they're hunched forward. That is a symptom of osteoporosis. When you look at the global impact of osteoporosis, what's the most staggering statistic is the fact that osteoporosis actually ends more women's lives than breast cancer. It's not as talked about because typically what happens is someone has a fracture, they go to the hospital, they can't recover from that fracture, and then they get pneumonia because they're in bed or they have some other complication. And generally that's discussed as they die of complications from a fracture, but the truth is, if they did not have porous bone, they did not have osteoporosis, the fracture may not have happened. So when I was 20 years old, I came home, and this is what Reno was talking about. I came home from college one summer, and my mom was all upset, and she says, "Oh, I have terrible news. I'm going to die." And she's dramatic, so I've heard that before. So I said, "Okay, Mom, why do you think that?" She says, "Well, I have osteoporosis." And I said, "Well, okay, you're not going to die, but that's a real thing. So I'm going to look into it." So as I started to read about osteoporosis, I felt completely different about the disease than I had felt that the general literature had described it. So when looking at what it is, how it happens, it's a deconditioning of the bone. So if it's a deconditioning, we could probably recondition it. Does that make sense? When a muscle gets weak, you can exercise and make it stronger. When your eyes get weak, there's even therapies that can do this. If you start to, your eyesight changes with age, there are ways to train the muscles of your eye to return to where they were. So if osteoporosis is truly a deconditioning of the bone, how do we recondition? So when I started to read about different interventions, walking was one of the things that I came across. You can build a little bit of bone from that, but not really enough to get somebody out of the danger area, out of a diagnosis of osteoporosis or osteopenia, which is what pre-osteoporosis is. So I came up, and you'll see on the second page of the machine, the bioDensity device. What I did was design a fixture where we could get similar loads into the human body that are normally seen in high impact activity. So, okay, so raise your hand if you saw this just last summer, Superman. Anybody watch the new Superman movie? You saw it? Joe, I'm sure you saw it. You didn't see Superman? You gotta see it. You now especially have to see it. So everybody remembers the comic book. The comic book's been around for 75 years. The movie actually came out on the 75th anniversary of the comic book. Here's the question. Why was Superman strong? There's actually real science behind the idea of Superman. Does anybody know why he was strong? No, kryptonite is what made him weak. Why was he strong? No, it was because he was from a planet that had higher gravity than ours. So by being on his planet, he had multiples of his own body weight placed on his body at all times. So his bones were more dense, his muscle was more dense, his tendons and ligaments had greater density. So there's actually incredible science behind it, and that science dates all the way back to 1892. The next slide down from that, this one right here. is the work of Dr. Julius Wolff. Now, that quote right there is really a translation of the summary of the original German that Dr. Wolff wrote this in. But what Dr. Wolff determined was that loading that compressed or distorted the shape of bone would trigger the cells inside the bone to pull in minerals and build a more complex architecture around themselves. So think about it this way. There's a bone right here. You compress the bone and actually change the shape. The cells inside the bone say, all right, we didn't like all that distortion. We're going to pull in minerals, make everything around our cells stronger, more powerful, able to handle greater loads. So when this little one starts running around, which will be soon, I'm sure, probably sooner than you want, you'll hear her coming, right? Why? Because little kids pound their heels on the ground, right? You know why they do that? They do it to build bone density. So they don't, this is not conscious, but they go through impact activity to compress and distort bone and stimulate the bone generation process. So as we become older, we shift our weight forward as we move on our toes. We cushion impact because impact starts to hurt. So the challenge in designing a device that can treat osteoporosis was getting the benefit or the high levels of force that are seen in impact without the risk of impact. Does that make sense? The benefit without the risk. So, look at this slide right here. The picture's pretty small, but this is a postmenopausal woman, mother of 3. If you look at her knee, and it's what's called the angle of inclusion behind her knee right here. I want everyone to be looking at that. So in the top picture, she's at rest. She has not started the compressive movement yet. The bottom picture, she is placing 10 times her body weight through her lower extremities. Everybody see that? So the important thing to point out is that the angle behind her knee has changed. So you see a 120-degree angle. She may be going from right here to right here. So there's a significant enough change. But the most important part from the top picture to the bottom picture is the seat does not move and the pad does not move. The movement is from the compression of her body. So her bones, her tendons, and her ligaments are all changing in shape to accommodate 10 times her body weight. Normally, that would be a very high impact loading event that her body would have to absorb. Here, she's in a controlled environment. And in that controlled environment, she's using her own comfort to determine how much force is put through her lower extremities. So, comfort is always the guide with the therapy, with bioDensity. So, if you only get to the edge of comfort, you go to the highest force that you're comfortable with, is it possible to injure? Is it?
No.
That's the right answer, thank you. Anyone can use it wrong and depart from comfort and jar into movement or something. But for the most part, the risk of injury is far diminished because everyone must be comfortable through the entire experience.